Computer. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Let's Learn About Supported Decision Making in Illinois. Today is Tuesday, August 9th, 2022, and we are glad that you are joining us to learn about supported decision making. So let's begin.
Hi, my name is Adam Weiser, and I'm part of the Illinois Self-Advocacy Alliance.
Hi, my name is Teresa Parks, and I'm with the Illinois Guardianship and Advocacy Commission, and I'm pictured here with my wonderful son, Nathan.
And my name is Christine Beck, and I, along with Adam, am also part of the Illinois Self-Advocacy Alliance. Teresa, tell us a little bit about the Illinois Guardianship and Advocacy Commission.
Thank you, Christine. Yes, the Illinois Guardianship and Advocacy Commission was the agency that initiated legislation on supported decision making. We are a state agency and we have offices across the state of Illinois as designated by the stars on the map that you see here, including offices in Chicago and Springfield. All of our programs in our agency support persons with disabilities. And here's a rundown of our programs. We have a program called the Office of State Guardian. We are the state guardian in Illinois for adults with disabilities, and we are considered the guardian of last resort, which means we don't get appointed unless a court somewhere in the state determines someone needs a guardian and there's no one else willing, available, or appropriate to serve as that individual's guardian. We are guardian for more than 5,000 individuals across the state of Illinois. We also have resource information available about adult guardianship on our website, and we have a training module for newly appointed guardians, which is now a requirement in our state unless the judge waives it. We also have 3 advocacy programs. We have a legal advocacy service, and in this program, we provide legal advice and legal representation for both children and adults with disabilities. Most often, our attorneys in that program are representing individuals who are facing some type of involuntary mental health proceedings, such as involuntary commitment to a mental health facility or court-ordered treatment, such as psychotropic medication treatment. Our attorneys represent those individuals to help ensure their due process protections during those proceedings. Our second advocacy program is called the Human Rights Authority. In that program, we investigate allegations of rights violations committed against people with disabilities by disability service providers. We go into all kinds of settings, from hospitals, hospital behavioral health units, group homes, vocational programs, nursing homes, special ed programs, and yes, even jails, because sometimes people with disabilities interface with the criminal justice system. And if we do find a rights violation, we work with that service provider to make improvements to their policies, procedures, and practices that further rights protections within the services that they provide. These investigations are conducted by regional panels of Human Rights Authority members who are appointed but serve voluntarily. And if anyone is out there interested in learning more about the Human Rights Authority or possibly volunteering to serve on one of our boards, we welcome your interest. You can find out more information on our agency website or by contacting me directly. Our third advocacy program is called the Special Education Advocacy Division, where we are providing Illinois families with a resource for special ed questions or issues. We also have been handling mediation cases as well as due process. Under our enabling legislation called the Guardianship and Advocacy Act, we can also recommend legislation. And this happens most often when through one of our programs, we encounter a gap in services, a gap in rights protections, maybe a reoccurring problem that just never seems to get resolved. And it seems like the best way to address it is through some type of public policy reform, such as legislation. And that's kind of what happened with the supported decision-making proposal. We were encountering situations in which people with disabilities, particularly people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, who had guardianship appointments when perhaps they didn't need a full-fledged guardianship. We also were hearing families who had children with disabilities who were turning age 18, and they were feeling pressure to pursue adult guardianship of their child, yet many families questioned the need for a full-fledged guardianship, and there was really no in-between option. So we started doing research on the concept of supported decision-making, and we looked at what other states were doing, and we pulled what we thought were the best parts of other state statutes and developed our own proposal. We ran the proposal by many groups, including the Self-Advocacy Alliance, and incorporated feedback that we heard from those various groups. And then we found legislative sponsors, and the legislation quickly sailed through the House and Senate and was signed by the governor in August of 2021 with an effective date of February of 2022. Next slide, please.
So this is Christine, and now we have an opportunity to learn from a wonderful self-advocate named Ricky Broussard from Disability Rights Texas. And Ricky is going to share about supported decision-making and how it differs from guardianship.
What is supported decision-making? A message from Disability Rights Texas.
Hello, my name is Ricky Broussard, and I'm at Disability Rights Texas. I'm here to talk to you today about supported decision making.
Supported decision-making is a way for people with disabilities to keep our rights and make our own choices with help from others instead of having a guardian who makes decisions for us. Guardianship.
People say guardians make it easier, but once you have a guardian, that guardian has control over you. A guardian is decided by a judge, and you do not have control over any important decisions that need to be made. It shouldn't be that way because it's about the individual's life. It's not about their life.
Under guardianship, you can lose the right to choose where you live, how you spend your money, who you spend your time with, and other important decisions. Supported decision-making.
Supported decision-making, it's all about the individual. It helps us make the right decision for ourselves in our life. If you need help making decisions, choose someone that you trust. It doesn't have to be a family member. It could be somebody at school you trust or somebody at work you trust. After you choose somebody to support you, you tell them what you need support on and how they can help you. Some of the things that your supporter can help you do is going to the grocery store or make medical decisions or with where you live, or they could help over your finances. In my support team, I let everybody know, okay, this is what I need decisions on, and this is what I need you to help me with. After I hear the pros and cons of the decision, that's when I make the final decision on whatever choice I make. We all need help to make decisions. We have to make decisions every day. Your rights should not be taken away just because you need help.
Thank you again, Ricky Broussard from Disability Rights Texas, for that wonderful video about supported decision-making and how it differs from guardianship. Let's move on.
The overall purpose of supported decision-making, according to the Act, is to recognize a less restrictive alternative for adults with intellectual or developmental disabilities who need assistance with decisions regarding daily living. A couple of key words I want to point out. First of all, this Act only applies to adults age 18 or older, and It only applies to adults with intellectual or developmental disabilities, and it's intended to be that alternative to guardianship for adults with disabilities who just need a little help in making decisions like we all do from time to time. However, this act provides for some structure as well as some safeguards. Next slide. The Act contains many components, and we're going to go over these in a little more detail, but it includes some guiding principles, a presumption of capacity statement. It describes what a supporter can do as well as what they cannot do. It contains within the statute an actual supported decision-making agreement, which is to be substantially followed. It addresses releases of information that allow supporters to access an individual's records. It also describes ways in which to end an agreement, as well as resources for reporting abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Next slide.
So the general description of supported decision-making is that an adult with an intellectual or developmental disability, and again, the adult has to be age 18 or older, the adult is called a principal, and the principal identifies a trusted supporter. That person could be a friend or a relative, and the supporter assists in certain areas of life that can include medical, financial, living arrangements, work, and other areas. The supporter arrangements are put into a written supported decision-making agreement in which both the supporter and the principal sign in front of two witnesses. The supporter then helps the principal with the decisions in the identified areas of support. The principal still and always makes the final decision. And the principal can choose to act independent of a supported decision-making agreement. Adam, tell us about some of the guiding principles of the Supported Decision-Making Act.
All adults should be able to live in a manner of one's own choosing. All adults should be able to participate in decisions regarding their own lives. Adults who need assistance should receive the most effective and least intrusive assistance. When providing assistance to another, the person's values, beliefs, cultural traditions should be respected.
And what about the presumption of capacity?
The Support Decision-Making Act emphasizes that all adults are presumed to have the capacity to make their own decisions unless otherwise determined by a court. Capacity is not voided simply because of a person's disability or the manner in which a person communicates.
And tell us about some of the duties that a supporter would have.
Assist with understanding information about a decision. Help access information about a decision. Assist with appointments. Track services. Determine the principal's decisions. Assist with communicating the principal's decisions. And advocating for the principal's wishes and decisions.
Thank you, Adam. And you can see the list does not contain making the decision for the principal. And what about access to information?
A supporter can only access information with the principal's consent and as approved under the agreement. The supporter must keep information confidential. The principal can still access information without the supporter. Releases of information may be needed for a supporter to access information.
And so, Teresa, tell us a little bit more about those releases of information.
Thanks, Christine. Yes, as Adam indicated, it's likely that you may need releases of information in order to access information regarding a principal. A release of information is a form that lists the specific types of information the supporter can have access to, such as medical information, financial records, or school records. And those requests, those releases of information should align with the areas of support identified in the supported decision-making agreement. A release of information must be signed by the principal and witnessed by a person who observes the principal signing it. And it's recommended, although not required, that someone other than the supporter be the witness. And here are two standalone releases of information that can be found on our agency's website and downloaded, printed, and used. One release is specifically for school records, and they meet certain requirements of the Illinois School Records Act. And then the other release is for everything else, from medical information, financial information, mental health, or developmental disability records. The principal would fill out the service provider at the top, indicate the types of records that they are wanting to access and that the principal approves that they have access to. And then you see a signature line for the principal as well as for the witness. And the signatures must be dated.
So we talked about some things that the supporter can and should do. Let's talk about some of the things that supporters cannot do. They cannot exert undue influence or force a principal to make a certain decision. They cannot make a decision for the principal. They also cannot access information about the principal unless authorized to by the principal or the agreement. Supporters cannot access information unrelated to an identified area of support. They cannot be paid for being a supporter, and they cannot work for the principal unless they are an immediate family member. Some other information about supporters. A supporter cannot be a current teacher involved in the principal's education. They cannot be a person who is an employee or an employer of the principal unless they are an immediate family member. A supporter cannot be a person providing paid support services unless they are an immediate family member. They cannot be a person who works for an agency financially responsible for the care and support of the principal. And they cannot be a person who is listed on the healthcare registry. So a person who has a finding of abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation. Supporters also cannot be a person who has a court order prohibiting contact with the principal, and a person who has been convicted of certain crimes. And those crimes include sex offense, aggravated assault, fraud, theft, forgery, or extortion. So some questions a supporter might ask a principal. So perhaps there is a person who wants to create a supported decision-making agreement, and they approach someone who is able to be a supporter, and the supporter might ask these questions. So what are your strengths? So asking again that principal, that person with an intellectual or developmental disability, what are your strengths? What are your needs? What are you going to need help with? What help could I give you that would benefit you the most? Is it looking up information on the computer? Is it accompanying you to appointments? Is it helping you with your money management? Another question: what role do you want me to play in decisions? Always knowing that the principal, the individual, has the call to make the decision that they want. What things do you not want me to do on your behalf? And what things do you want me to do on your behalf? So again, it's having a conversation. It's deepening a relationship so that both parties know exactly what is wanted and what is expected. So Teresa, being a supporter is an amazing responsibility, and it's about that relationship. So what are the ways a supporter involves the principal in this whole process?
Thanks, Christine. Yes, there are ways in which the supporter should always involve the principal. For example, they should make sure that the principal, the person with disabilities, understands what the supporter is doing on their behalf, what they're currently doing, or what they have done on their behalf. The supporter should always review any information obtained regarding a decision directly with the principal. Both the principal and the supporter should inform any involved service providers about the supporter's role, their duties, their limitations, and that decisions are always made by the principal. And as much as possible, the principal should be present when the supporter is gathering information and when any decisions are communicated. We have created a standalone supported decision-making agreement that's available on our agency's website, and there's a link here on this slide. And agencies are really required to follow that agreement unless the principal tells them not to. The next slides, I'm going to share a little bit more information about the agreement. The agreement starts out with some basic definitions of the supporter and the principal. It also describes some overarching duties of the supporter, that they are to act in good faith, that they are to act within the authority of the agreement, that they are to act loyally and without self-interest, and they are to avoid conflicts of interest. Page 1 of the agreement also requires the supporter to list their contact information. Page 2 of the agreement is really the meat of the agreement. This is where the principal identifies the areas of support needed by initialing those areas. It might be help with obtaining food, clothing, or shelter. It might be with medical care or counseling or mental health services. It might be assistance with finances or money management or applying for public benefits, helping the individual find work, or assisting the principal with residential or housing arrangements. It might mean helping the principal with school, because it's very possible that when an individual turns age 18, they might still be in school. It might also mean helping to advocate for oneself. And then we have a blank line for any other areas of assistance that the principal might identify. Now, the principal can identify one area, a few areas. They can initial all of the areas. It's also recommended for those areas in which they do not want support to mark NA on the line for not applicable. In the middle part of page 2, the agreement again reiterates the role of the supporter, what they can do, such as helping to access information surrounding a decision and helping the principal understand options about a decision, and finally helping the principal communicate the decision. Next slide, please. The last part of page 2 discusses releases of information and the kinds of records that the supporter might have access to based on the approval of the principal. But again, a separate release form will likely be required beyond this agreement, as indicated previously. The next slide will show the final page of the supported decision-making agreement, and this is the signature page. This is where both the principal and the supporter sign it, they date the signature, and then 2 other people called witnesses must sign and date the agreement. And once again, the witnesses must be adults, age 18 or older, and they cannot be the supporter or the principal. The last page of the agreement also lists contact information for abuse reporting, should that be a need. When we started looking at the concept of supported decision-making, one of the concerns that arose was whether or not there would be some protections for persons with disabilities. And we believe that the actual act, the language of the legislation, as well as the actual agreement, includes some safeguards to protect the principal's interests, their choices, their preferences, and hopefully to protect against potential abusive situations. And here are just some examples of how those safeguards play out. For example, the legislation repeatedly emphasizes that the principal, the person with the disability, always makes all final decisions. The actual agreement that's signed and witnessed documents what a supporter can and cannot do. The legislation also defines the supporter's duties, and it limits it to gathering information, helping to review options surrounding a decision, and perhaps helping to communicate the principal's final decision. Additional safeguards include the fact that there are disqualifications. There are some people who cannot serve as supporters for a variety of reasons, whether it be a criminal background or conflict of interest. In addition, the Act itself includes ways in which to report abuse should a supporter overstep an identified area of assistance. And another protection is that the principal, the person with disabilities, can end the agreement at any time.
Thinking about that protection of ending the supported decision-making agreement at any time, here are the ways that can be done. The first is by simply tearing up the agreement. Another way a principal can or a supporter can end the agreement is asking someone to tear it up in front of the principal or the supporter. The principal can also sign and date a statement that they are ending the agreement. And the principal can say they want to end the agreement in front of 2 people or 2 witnesses. A supported decision-making agreement can also end if there is a finding of abuse, neglect, or exploitation by the supporter, or if there is a restraining order against the supporter by the principal. The supporter can end the agreement by giving notice to the principal, and it really is recommended that a 2-week notice is given to allow time for the principal to decide if he or she still wants support in that particular area or areas, or they can decide who they want to ask to be their supporter and get that new decision-making agreement in place.
Our agency's website, the Guardianship and Advocacy Commission, has a number of resources available on supported decision-making, both in English and in Spanish. We have a brochure that describes supported decision-making. We have training specifically for persons with disabilities that was developed with the assistance of the Self-Advocacy Alliance. We have training specifically for supporters, which was a requirement of the Act. And at the end of the training, a certificate is issued that can be used to prove that the supporter took training. We also have fact sheets available about supported decision-making. We have that model supported decision-making agreement that I shared in a previous slide. and that's available for downloading, printing, and filling out, as are the releases of information, one for school records and one for any other type of record. We also have a frequently asked questions sheet available on our website, and here we have a link to our supported decision-making webpage on the Guardianship and Advocacy Commission website, and we have included a link to the National Center for Supported Decision-Making, which also has a host of available materials. And this is what our website looks like at the present. That may be subject to change.
Support decision-making in action.
Thank you, Adam. Now we're going to take a moment to learn from Will McMillan. He is a self-advocate who has a supported decision-making agreement, and Will is going to share what that means for him in his life.
Supportive decision making is that you are making decisions, but you also are actually getting help from other people.
One of the most important things about being human is feeling that you have control over your life and that you understand and feel good about what decisions you're making.
Decisions I would make on my own would be deciding what I want to eat, and also check my mail when I need to, check in with friends, my parents, and my siblings.
We all use supported decision making. Every time you ask for advice from a friend, family member, you may ask advice from a professional when you're making a medical decision.
Some decisions I need help with. Who do I ask that help me make decisions on my own? Would be my peers, my parents, and friends in the community. I look for people that I trust and care about me. Some decisions I like to get help with would be definitely medical decisions. Sometimes you may not know what they are, and that there's always good people that can help. My mom helps me make decisions on talking to my doctor. She helps explain what's going on. Making decisions to live on my own is important. I prepare for myself for work. I have my clothes that I can lay out on my bed, and then I make that decision on my own to do that. I might make mistakes, but I learn to pick myself up and keep going. My mistake would be drinking too much caffeine. I had to learn to cut back. I'm learning how to cook. So I get to find my own recipes. I find my own meals, or I actually have meals that are left over from dinners or lunch. It feels great that I can live on my own and have my freedom.
Whether we have a disability or not, very well-intentioned supporters can sometimes make decisions about our life or try to really influence decisions about our life.
It's your life. When I make a tough decision, it would be something that might be hard and a challenge, but I'm up to the challenge. But like I said, you have a group behind you. The reason why you have that support group is because they know what you want and they'll like to help support you. If you need help making decisions, go to your full support team and they will have your back.
And thank you to Will for teaching us how supported decision making works in his life. Let's talk a little bit about the dignity of risk. You heard that Will said he would like to cut down on caffeine. I think that's something that I would like to do as well. We talk a lot as supporters and perhaps as family members and allies and professionals about the dignity of risk. And certainly it comes into play as we want people to learn how to make decisions that impact their lives. Dignity of risk is respecting a person's autonomy and self-determination to make choices for themselves. It's about giving people place and space to take risks that go along with ordinary life. And those risks are necessary for personal growth and development. It's also about providing support based on a person's interests, abilities, and needs. And remembering that mistakes equal experience, and everybody is entitled to have a life experience and to learn from those mistakes. Adam, share with us, please, 10 tips for supported decision making. And these would be tips that a supporter could use. Maybe it's tips that a family member or a professional or another ally could use in helping people think through and make decisions.
Give people time to think about what a question means to them and say things in their own words. Give people the chance to ask about something that they don't understand before you explain it to them. Make sure all facilitators know their roles and give each other time to do their parts. Be prepared to do role play to help explain things on the agreement form. Keep track of time and don't spend too much time on one thing. Focus on support for deciding things, not for doing things. Spend more time talking about who could be good supporters and what supporters look like. Make sure people talk about the support that they want in the future and not just the support that they are getting now. Talk about how the person will use the agreement in their lives and try to educate them about other ways they could use it too. Share examples from your own life about the hard decisions you made with support.
Thank you, Adam, for sharing. And these 10 tips are just amazing. Whether you are a named supporter or you are an ally supporting someone in going through life, these are wonderful tips to remember. And these tips came from Chester Finn, who was a social connectedness fellow in 2021 and a proud self-advocate. And we have the link to his document called Supported Decision Making, a Self-Advocate's 10 Commandments for Community Members. So let's check out some supported decision making in action.
Tony wants a supporter to help him with medical decisions and paying bills. Tony has an older sister named Mary. Tony really trusts Mary and talks with her about being his supporter. Mary hasn't been convicted of any crimes that would prevent her from being a supporter. Mary agrees to be Tony's supporter. Tony fills out the support decision-making agreement. He initials medical and financial assistance for his areas of support. Tony and Mary sign the agreement, and their mom and dad signs the agreement as the witnesses. Tony has a doctor's appointment. The doctor wants Tony to change medicine. Tony tells the doctor he wants to talk to his supporter first. Tony signs a release of information so that Mary can look at his medical records to help him get information. Mary helps Tony learn about the new medication. Mary also helps Tony write a list of questions to ask the doctor. Tony will decide if he wants to take the new medication. After a few years, Tony learns how to take care of his medications and pay his bills without Mary's help. Tony decides he wants to end the agreement. Tony thanks his sister Mary for helping him learn about his medical and financial needs. Tony tears up the agreement. Remember, the goal of SCM is to recognize a less restrictive alternative for adults with intellectual or developmental disabilities who need assistance with decisions regarding daily living. The SCM Act emphasizes that all adults are presumed to have the capacity to make their own decisions unless otherwise determined by a court. Capacity is not void simply because of a person's disability or the manner in which a person
communicates.
Yeah.
Thank you, Adam, for those great reminders.
So I'm going to share with you some frequently asked questions that have come up as we've been rolling out this act and information about it. One of the questions is, does the supported decision-making agreement found in the legislation have to be used? Well, the act does not specifically require the use of the exact form, only that any agreement should substantially follow the legislated form. So this is very similar to language that we see in the Illinois Power of Attorney Act that has a sample power of attorney form. It is to be substantially followed, but you can use the exact form. Most other states that we researched about supported decision-making include a sample form within their statute. Another question that has come up is whether or not the supported decision-making agreement does it need to be notarized. And it does not. In our initial version of the legislative proposal, we did have a notary requirement in it, but it was recommended by advocates that we remove that because it's very difficult for some persons to have access to a notary. So we substituted the notary requirement for the 2 witness signatures. And just as a reminder, the 2 witnesses must be adults and they cannot be either the supporter or the principal. Another question, is a physician statement required for a supported decision-making agreement? This is a requirement of guardianship, but it is not a requirement for supported decision-making. Another question, can the adult with disabilities have more than one supported decision-making agreement? I think you heard a couple of examples in the videos where they talked about a support team. Well, that is possible. There's nothing in the Act that prohibits an individual from having more than one supporter. They might help out with different areas of support, but to avoid any conflicts between supporters, any such arrangement should be clearly documented in the agreement. Another question, is there a way for a principal to designate a backup supporter in case the supporter is suddenly not able to function due to illness or death? Again, there's nothing in the Act that would prohibit a principal from adding an addendum to the agreement that would identify a backup supporter if one was needed. Here is our contact information for the Guardianship and Advocacy Commission, including a toll-free number. This is a link to our opening page of our website, as well as my email address.
And on behalf of the Alliance, we thank you for taking time out of your day to watch this presentation. Universal design support for the development of this presentation was provided by the Illinois Self-Advocacy Alliance, or the Alliance for short. We have a website and we have an email address. You can also find us and like us on Facebook. Thank you again for your time today. We hope you enjoyed this presentation.